Welcome, fellow storm riders. You are officially a rider on the hypnotic rash, and it's spreading like wildfire. He believes Janis Joplin is the greatest blues singer of all time.
She is.
His favorite candy is Jelly Babies.
They're bad for you.
And he is without a doubt the smartest and funniest person he knows. But I judge him because he still has not spent sufficient time on personal modesty, if that's what they're calling it these days. Please welcome Mike Mandel.
Fantastic. I began the program by coughing on Chris's neck. Just fantastic. He's looking really startled right now. He's pointing at the microphone, but I'm just still glorying in the actual cough on the neck and gripping his shoulder convulsively while I did it. That's fantastic.
That was. About 5 podcasts ago, I think you explained that as a hilarious thing to do.
I can't let it go, though. I think I'm going to do it every 5 podcasts, just hoping you've forgotten.
Oh, I will not forget about that. Now, we have a very special guest with us, so let's introduce Suzanne, and then we'll talk about why we're actually recording this podcast today. Suzanne!
Hey, hi everybody, how are you?
It's good to have you here. Suzanne is Mindscaper Extraordinaire, and we're going to be talking about mindscaping on this. We're also going to be touching base about hypno-thoughts, and we're going to be discussing why Chris keeps talking about a rash. The hypnotic rash is spreading. It's fantastic.
Yeah, we came up with that. I don't remember when, but the original idea was the hypnotic storm riders, because there's a storm raging worldwide, and how do we know? Because we caused it.
Yes, we did.
Which really means you caused
Thank
it, Mike.
you.
And then we decided to call it a rash. Something or a virus, the hypnotic virus.
No, it wasn't a virus. I call my rash Saddam because it's just reached my bag, Dad.
Oh, that's horrible. I can't believe
Just mentioning a city. Nothing wrong with that.
I can't believe you put that in a podcast. That's just
We'll edit that out.
Way too funny. And of course, by edit that out means we will leave it in.
Leave it in, yeah.
All right, let's talk. I'm going to introduce the concept, the topic, and why we're going to talk about mindscaping. I will not turn this into a Ken Sweatman story, but I know that in the show,
sales pitch,
and I know
that is our hope.
I know that in the show notes you will accuse me of turning this into a Ken Sweatman story as you shuffle paper.
It's well on its way.
All right. So, mindscaping is something we talked about last podcast in episode 67, and we got quite a lot of questions about it. I think it's probably the podcast where you went into the most depth, other than in our paid products.
I think so.
And we're going to go into a bit more depth about mindscaping because people have been asking questions. We're going to talk about some case studies. We're going to relate it back to general life, and so even if you have no interest at all in learning mindscaping, I think this podcast will help you learn some tools that will make you a better conversationalist to help people.
Chris, you did that remarkably well. That was all cogent and congruent.
And totally non-Ken Sweatman-y.
Totally non-Ken Sweatman. I'm thinking, I actually want to hear this.
Yeah.
I want to learn this.
And of course, you created it. And the reason Suzanne is here is because myself and a few others, including Suzanne, were your initial students, where you taught version 1.0. And what do you remember about those days, Suzanne?
That's a very good question. I remember Mike coming to me and 2 other therapists and asking us if we wanted to learn this, and it's really changed my life.
And of course you said yes.
Oh, well, yeah. And it's changed my life and subsequently the life of many people. So
it's
thanks,
a cool
Mike.
thing, and it was there all the time. Chris is pointing at the microphone. It's all right. I know how to work this, folks. He's pointing a lot. And
I just want to make sure you're all close enough.
That's why we have our editor go over it, just raise the volumes and tweak it and everything.
No, not going to happen.
Right. Disregard previous message. But yeah, Mindscape is cool. I didn't really invent it. I sort of discovered it, and I remember running it past you and Dee Dee and Nancy. And the 3 awesome women who are my hypno babes, and they...
Hey, you're missing someone.
They'd attested
I
it
was
for
there
me.
too.
No, you were actually the first person I ever mindscaped, Chris.
That's true.
And maybe you want to talk about that.
Yeah, sure. But before we do, let's just make
and maybe
sure.
Not.
I don't want to go into talking about mindscaping before we explain a little bit about what it is. Then we can go through some case studies and we can relate it back towards how everybody can use this concept of unconscious change in life.
Right, and you did get that remarkable email. We've had a couple of them come in from people who had no previous experience who are using this now, even with their own families.
It is.
That man worked with his kid.
Mm-hmm. It is an easy thing, and I think even if you don't have any training formally other than this podcast, the description we're going to give you here is probably sufficient for you to use your imagination and make some changes happen for other people.
So maybe I'll give you a bit of a definition and we can jump in from there. Mindscaping is a way of building a bridge to the unconscious mind of the person you are working with, whereby the unconscious mind of that person offers you metaphorically the keys that will solve their problem. In other words, their unconscious mind gives you the keys to the kingdom, and you make it work from that.
Right. Now, this relates to hypnosis. For those of you hypnotists understanding the Ericksonian methodologies, you know that Erickson told a lot of metaphors, a lot of stories. And so the stories would resonate with the listener, and people would go away and go, wow, that, they wouldn't necessarily consciously understand, but their unconscious would hear the story and go, dude, that applies to your life. This is what you need to do. And the guy would go out and make some changes. And so if you're a brilliant Ericksonian hypnotist and you can come up with these stories, that's wonderful. But if you're not sure how to come up with the right story, the easiest thing to do is use a tool like mindscaping, because the subject's own unconscious generates the metaphor, if you want to put it in that
And why would it do that, Suzanne? Maybe you want to answer that. Why would it be in the vested interest of their unconscious to generate the metaphor for you?
Well, your unconscious mind is what wants to keep you safe.
Right.
It wants to protect you. So it's going to give you all the information you need to make the changes. And we just facilitate you getting there.
Right. And it's actually a metaphor that fits you personally exactly the way it should, as opposed to me coming up with a metaphor to tell you for your problem of whatever, driving too close to other cars, let's say.
Yeah, it reminds me of the story of my daughter Evelyn.
If you have this if you're a habitual close driver or tailgater or whatever, then I have to come up with a story that I think will resonate with your unconscious.
Which is easy if you're Milton Erickson.
Right, but if you're not, then it's easier to have you come up with the unconscious metaphor yourself, which is what mindscaping is. So let's do it really quickly here. We'll explain. You start, Mike, if I understand correctly, and I think I do.
I think we do.
You follow a protocol that, and
it's very specific, but it's very simple.
And it's a protocol that will pre-frame for the subject this existence of a map that will apply to their problem, their specific problem.
Right, and like Chris said, specific problem. That's true. You will realize mindscaping can be used with something that is enormous, like their health or their relationships.
Broad or specific.
But you can also do it for something as specific as that meeting you have tomorrow morning with your boss.
Right.
So you can aim it with tremendous specificity. And I know, Suzanne, you've done a lot of that,
Absolutely.
aiming it right at potential.
With cancer patients, I've worked with self-esteem issues. I've done, oh my Lord, I can't even...
You worked with MS?
I've worked with MS. You're absolutely right with that. People that needed to be congruent and in the moment and in uptime for meetings the next day.
So large sweeping health issues
Absolutely.
And just general, I need to be going into that meeting feeling confident.
Absolutely.
Right. And now continuing with that, we pre-frame this existence of this internal map. And there is a protocol that we're not going to tell you the whole thing now, but the basic idea is their unconscious opens this map, which has really interesting three-dimensional features on it. And the client goes into a trance by default. You don't even have to do a formal hypnotic induction. So if you've never done hypnosis, mindscaping works really well because you get hypnosis anyway, automatically. And unlike a typical trance, for some remarkable reason, Chris, you've heard me say so many times, don't get people to talk in a light hypnotic state because you'll fragment it and they'll come out of it. You need a deep trance for that. But with mindscaping, they go to a state where they're able to talk fluently and tell you exactly what they see in front of them, behind them, what the sky is like, and describe the remarkable structures. One woman told me of a building in front of her that had the word trust on the top of it. She started crying when she saw this. I mean, you told me the example of the kid who had the fish behind him floating in the air.
Right, and we'll get to that one in a little while. And it is a really simple thing. So basically, Mike, if people don't take any mind-skipping training with you, they could probably experiment with this just by saying to the subject, I want you to pretend that there's a map that's appropriate for this problem.
Right, but then they're going to miss a lot of the protocol, which is avoiding abreaction and avoiding a lot of the problematic things and pushing them through the process very quickly, because there's two aspects to mindscaping. One is the discovery of the person's individual map. And Suzanne, I know you've experimented with this and found, as I have, that when you're doing a mindscape, you start to see it yourself, even though you're the hypnotist.
Yeah, you see absolutely, well, I shouldn't say you see absolutely everything, but I've been able to tell people afterwards about the road they were on, the car they were driving, that they pulled into the home, explained everything exactly, and he said it's exactly what he had seen.
Right, as long as you feed back the information.
Exactly.
Yeah. And as long as you're feeding back the information that matches what they told you in the first place, and you're not changing things and distorting things, which is
so we're eliciting the map, and by eliciting it, that alone will often give the subject the clues and the changes they need. And in other cases, maybe 20% of the time, we actually landscape the map. We change things. We remove things, remove structures, and put new things in their place. I went to remove an entire forest for one subject that was in his way. It was thorny and impassable. And he said, no, he said, there's owls in that forest, and I like them. I said, okay. So we built a road around the forest instead and let the owls stay there because they serve some unconscious purpose.
Right. So mindscaping is essentially identify what is it that you want to help a person work on. Then you pre-frame that there is some map that's going to appear. You follow the protocol to bring the map up. Then you elicit details about the map. Then you landscape the map, make changes to it, and then necessary, and then you bring them out of trance. And that is essentially the equivalent of telling somebody a metaphor to apply to their problem so that they can then go and change things in their life to fix their problem.
Right, but as you know, it goes way, way beyond.
It involves the
metaphor.
subject.
It involves
the client.
And also, we've discovered that mindscaping changes go very deep. They tend to be very ecological. We're calibrating the subject the entire time. And after 4 years of doing this now, we've seen remarkable things, but the changes continue to resonate for days and sometimes weeks as things fall into place. And people report over and over and over, I don't know what you did, but my life changed. This stuff works. Remember, Layla totally transformed her life and wound up moving to the Caribbean. She said this stuff, well, she didn't say stuff, but she said this works.
Stuff kind of worked now. Yeah. So let's do some case studies then. I want to talk about the one that you already pre-framed here, Mike, which was the guy who's the guy, a father, who did mindscaping. He actually bought the program that we sell online. He learned it for himself, so not having any therapeutic background, but learned the skill. And then he wanted to use it on his son who had anger issues. And this was like an 11-year-old kid, I think, if I recall correctly. And behind him was this weird blue fish, and in front of him was a tree. And the tree had red leaves, and he didn't like the tree, so he had the kid change the leaves to green and different colors. And what was around was like this dry, arid desert. I guess that's redundant, isn't it? Right. And beyond that was a road with cars that were all like broken down and zombie-ish kind of people walking around. So he landscaped that entire scene, changed the tree, changed the desert to a forest, dirt. He changed dirt ground to grassy ground, made all kinds of changes. And this kid felt so much better in the end, right? So there are lots of different scapes that have happened that we've seen that we never would have guessed what the person's going to imagine is in their map.
No,
until
not
it
a clue.
happens.
And it's astounding what comes up. Suzanne, what are some of the things you've run into?
I had a fella who came to me who he was a painter. He was an artist, and he just couldn't paint. He wasn't able to be creative any longer. At that point, put him through a mindscape, and it was amazing what I could see, what he was seeing, and it was a dry riverbed, and it didn't matter how much we went into this, he just couldn't make the changes. Long story short, ended up that he came back and was doing repercussion Picassos to a T. And out of that, I ended up having a reproduction Alphonse Mucha, which I absolutely adore, and it's coveted now.
So that's really cool. Now you're saying an empty riverbed or like a dry riverbed. Yep. So did he make any changes to it?
Well, of course.
What did you do?
Well,
what did he do?
I'm not going to give that away.
Okay. But he made some changes.
He made some changes,
now,
absolutely.
Hopefully people can imagine. The reason metaphor is cool is because metaphor helps people relate to things they already understand. And everyone listening can probably imagine that a dry riverbed, whatever you said the correct term was, Mike.
A wadi.
A wadi.
Wadi with a D.
It speaks to emptiness, and something is lacking. It's supposed to be filled with water, which is a resource, right?
His creativity had dried up.
Right. And so I bet you if he was talking about it, he would have probably said, oh, my creativity dried up. And so no surprise that the map that he made matches that so congruently.
It's amazing how that works. And creativity responds very well to mindscaping. I worked with a young man who's part of Neil Strauss's Society International and worked with him on Skype. And Suzanne and I both do this. We call it mind Skyping. It works really well over Skype. And we see clients that way. And I worked with him. He was in Brittany, France. We had a good connection. Worked on his creativity with a mindscape. And I ran into him in Toronto when Neil Strauss came to Toronto last year. We hung out together and went and had dinner. And this guy was there. and he came up and gave me a big hug, and he said he's written 50,000 words since the Mindscape.
Wow.
He said his creativity has exploded.
That's amazing. I want to ask you a quick question about this one, Mike. Remember, we've talked so many times about how a subject needs to be at threshold. Do you see any difference here, or Suzanne, for you as well, any difference here? Do you need to be at threshold to make changes with mindscaping, or by taking someone through the mindscaping progress, can we bypass that in some way? I'm curious as to what your answer is.
Well, I'm assuming you meant process when you said progress, so I will act on what I'm thinking rather than what you said, which was a horrendous mistake, Mr. Thompson. But yeah, Chris, you are bang on with that, apart from the word that was wrong. But you're bang on, because while in typical therapy, whether it's NLP or empowering questions or whatever, you typically need someone at threshold where something has to change. It has to be now, and it has to be me. But one of the great ways you can use mindscaping is, I'd never use it for something like a screaming phobia or whatever, but it is great to prepare the way for dealing with other things. So mindscaping, a good session, can actually put people at threshold. Or you can use it after a session to tie up any loose ends at the end of a therapy. It's really fluid, and you can use it with NLP or any of the tapping regimens, and it is hypnotic in and of itself.
Right. I was thinking, you can't make somebody want to quit smoking, let's say, but you can use a mindscaping session to help somebody understand the pathway towards where they want to be and be more clear about that. And that may bring them
in
towards
wellness and things like that instead. Right.
What are your thoughts on that, Suzanne?
I'm thinking exactly the same thing you guys are.
She takes the easy way out.
Of course I do.
Perfectly acceptable.
Well, you're right.
It's intimidating being with you guys. I got to be honest.
Hey, well, you're welcome to join us anytime. Let's talk about your situation, because you, I believe, are the only person ever to have mindscaped Mike Mandel.
She is.
Oh, that was that was actually my first mindscape.
Is this okay to talk about, Mike?
Yeah, it certainly is.
Are you
Chris.
sure?
Yeah.
Well, it was my first, and it was the best, I would think.
Women always say that about me.
I was gonna make a joke about that.
A man of the vigor of a man half his age.
That's right.
The virile strength of a 15-year-old boy.
Let's talk about it, though.
Okay,
I was serious.
What do you want to know?
What were you working? What were you working on, Mike?
Well, what happened was when I was teaching the three amazing hypno babes how to do mindscaping, they were actually my beta testing group as I started to formulate this. And I wanted them to tell me whether or not it worked, to go and do this on people and get results. So in the session, each one got to do a mindscape on someone else in the room to make sure that we're doing it correctly. And Suzanne got to do the mindscape with me. And I had the most amazing mindscape, Chris. And it's incredible how this has worked out, because what happened was, do you remember what it was?
I do. It was the water and the two islands and the sun
Well, it was the water,
and the boat.
The boat.
The boat.
Now, it wasn't,
the pirate ship.
It wasn't islands. It was the horizon was sort of rocky, low mountains, and it was twilight with the moon in the sky and full moon shining over the water, which, of course, is a wonderful symbol of the unconscious. It amazes me what the unconscious will throw out. And in this lagoon was this wooden pirate ship, this kid's pirate ship, which is actually on my desk at home. And I've always said I find it funny working, for the corporations and pillaging them, because I'm, in essence, a buccaneer and self-employed, and I admit it.
You're a pirate.
I admit it, so it's okay. So this was my symbol, and the ship was sailing towards this gap in the lagoon out to the open sea. And Suzanne said, "How does that make you feel?" And I said something like, "Challenged, but I find it really exciting and interesting, like opportunity." And when you checked back with my mindscape a few weeks later,
it had changed.
It had changed. The ship was still there, but it had moved now, and it was much, much closer to this gap in the mountains. And after that, the stuff Chris and I were doing just took off, and the business took off, and everything's just gone to the planet.
Yeah, you can totally see, and in this case, I'll use the word see correctly because it's a very visual thing, how that is a metaphor for growth and personal development and change and expanding your horizons, quite literally.
Yeah.
That's really cool. And so you got to do that mindscape on Mike, and obviously that's the kind of thing that sells you immediately, because you're not planning on when you're experiencing it or doing it on someone else, you're not, let's say you're the person experiencing the mindscape. You're not saying, "Oh, well, what do I see? Oh, I think I'll see a pirate ship."
No, it's always a surprise.
It just pops and you go, "Oh, wow, that's cool."
Can I interject here?
Yeah.
That same day, Mike put me through a Mindscape, and we changed my internal map. Everything was wonderful. I felt great. And then he said to me, go and find just a little present. Well,
this is wild.
This is wild. So I came back, and I had found a snail, and it didn't make any sense to me at all, because my Mindscape...
A snail.
I know. So the Mindscape was about... I had been to 12 schools in 13 years and never felt settled. So it was about feeling settled. Come back with the snail. Afterwards, Mike says to me, so do you know what the snail is about? And I said, like, no, I can't even imagine. So it took about, I don't know, maybe 6-8 months. He kept coming back to me saying, did you figure the snail out yet? I'm like, no, I didn't.
Because we don't explain the Mindscape to
Never
you.
explain it. Never interpret it. Never offer an opinion. Just do it.
Exactly. So about 6 months later, he said, did you ever figure it out? I said, no, tell me. So he finally told me. He said the snail is about, he's carrying his home on his back. And
brings his home with him.
Takes us home with him, and that's where your home is. And I felt much better about that, and it made sense to me. And after the Mindscape, I did feel amazing.
And I wouldn't have explained it if you hadn't kept insisting for months.
I wanted to know.
Normally, you wouldn't see a client often enough to go and explain it to them 6 months later. You'd have fixed them, and they'd be long gone, living an awesome life.
Exactly. Well, fast forward to about 2 or 3 weeks ago, I was doing a client through Skype, and he wanted to be more congruent with a meeting that he was going to. So we did the Skype on that. We did the Scape on that. We changed everything that we needed to change. He was congruent. He was feeling better. He had all his resources. He was in uptime. He felt amazing. But I'd known he had flown out to the other side of the country, and he was in a new apartment, and he didn't feel settled, and he didn't feel safe, and he just didn't feel like it was home. So I just brought up the Mindscape that I had with Mike, and I said, did I ever tell you about my first Mindscape? I said it had to do with me, 12 schools, 13 years, the whole story. And then I told him about the snail, and I kept elaborating on the snail and going on and on about how beautiful the snail was. And at first it was slimy, and now
something happened.
And something happened.
But there's no such thing as conversational hypnosis.
No, of course there's not. Of course there's not. Long story short, again, he sent me an email about 3 days later, and he said, I don't know what you did. He said, but I've cleaned up my apartment. I've thrown out the things that I didn't need. I've hosted a dinner party, and I'm keeping my place tidy. All because of a metaphor about a snail.
So
unbelievable.
He was messy, not feeling connected to his new home, and didn't have a lot of friends yet. And all of a sudden, he had a dinner party and a clean apartment.
Exactly.
Awesome.
So your metaphor from your Mindscape explaining to him mapped across and made these shifts in him as well.
Exactly.
So how many of you are going to go out and clean your apartments and get new friends?
That's really awesome. Now, let's do another one here. So we had a father. Again, this is someone who purchased the Mindscaping program online from us, had never done it before, and he had I'm going to keep the details obviously private because we don't have permission to share all of them, so no names, but the father had a son who was preparing for private school admission tests, and they were having a struggle. Whatever the issue was, the son was just not getting a high enough score on the percentile scale to get admitted. So they took him through Mindscaping, or the father did Mindscaping with the son. And really in this one, it was a classic example of there not having to be a lot of landscaping work. They elicited the map, which again, interestingly, involved the tree, and finding a path around the tree to get to what was beyond it. But they didn't have to make seemingly any major changes. It seems that just by having the son elicit this map and notice the path around the tree, that was enough. And then the aftermath is he wrote us and he said, we did another practice test and our son scored 30 percentile points higher than on his previous best.
The following day after the Mindscape. It's mind-blowing. And I'm hearing this again and again from people, and it's startling, some of the things that show up, some of the imagery. I worked with a man on Skype who makes these green men for gardens. And a green man is an English symbol. It's actually all through Europe. And you'll see it. We have one in our backyard on the wall, and it's a face made out of twigs and branches and things. And it's an archetypal symbol. And he makes these, and they're garden symbols. And I worked with him for smoking cessation and did some Mindscaping just to help him over the hump. And we did this on Skype. And his frickin' Mindscape, Chris, was in front of him, was all twigs and branches in his face, and he was looking through them. He didn't even notice it. Sometimes the unconscious of the subject will share with you as the mindscaper what it's doing. He didn't even notice. His face had become the green man.
So his mindscape was looking out the eyes of a green man.
Yeah, and he never even noticed.
If it had eyes.
He just, there's all these branches in front of my face, and I'm pushing my face through.
Oh, that is wild.
Okay, we got to talk about how weird this can get, because there's been interesting examples. I worked with a man who had a golden tree on his horizon. He loved it. It was his target state, and he was trying to get to it. And he just couldn't quite get there. He felt like it was blocked. So we worked to build a pathway to it. We made the tree bigger and brighter so he could see it from where he was. But he was looking through a city. And on his left side was a sudden drop-off that with a wire along, like you'd see on a highway, just a wire with some posts. On the right side was a row of buildings that looked like old warehouse buildings. And I said, how does it feel? And he said, bleak, empty. I said, do you want to put some lights? And he said, yeah. So he put a row of street lights from where the buildings were right down through the city. And I said, do you want to add anything else? He said, I need some people in the town now. So he added some people, and his state was improving. I'm watching him feel better. And then I said, well, what about that drop-off to your left? He said, oh, no, I've already looked at that. He said, there's just some yachts down there and boats. He said, they're fine. But his brain was filling in some of these things purely decorative. And one of the things we've noticed that is consistent is every single time the person has a waterfall in a mindscape, I get them to look behind it. If they reach through the water, there's always a cave behind it, and there's always something in the cave for them to find.
Isn't that interesting? That is so true. I think I remember going through a mindscape, and I had a waterfall at some point in the class. And, yep, there was a space behind it. I can't remember it.
Now, we cannot let this go without discussing the Goat Man.
Oh, no!
All right, listen to this, guys. I worked with a young East Indian engineer on Scape, and he wanted to make some personal changes in his life. And mindscaping is great for generative change, where you're not fixing something wrong, but you're improving things. You're improving things you already do well. You're making them even better. And so he wanted to improve a few things, make them even better. No big problems, although he did have issues with his father. And his father had died a few years ago, and this is still in the background. I didn't know anything about this. So we've done his mindscape. Everything's fine. I ask, is there any final thing you want to check out? And he's got his eyes closed. He's on Skype with the, on my monitor. And he said, yeah, there's one thing that keeps catching my attention. And I said, what? He said, it looks like a subway tunnel down to my right here in front of me. An old one, like New York City, an old dingy subway tunnel. I said,
underground.
This is my first encounter with the things underground. And I said, well, what do you want to do? He said, I kind of want to check it out. I said, okay. So my voice will go with you. So check out down the tunnel. And I'm watching him, and he sort of looks kind of stunned. And he said, okay, it's really weird down here. Now he's saying down here, he's associated into it. And I said, what do you mean? He said, it's an abandoned subway. It's not being used in years. There's just some work lights on. The tunnel is very dark, and there's a couple of like candy bars and old pop cans lying around. And he said, it's really weird down here. And then I said, okay, do you want to come back? He said, hang on. And he just paused. He said, someone's calling me from down the tunnel. Suzanne's freaking out. She hates this story.
Yeah.
I said,
I know it too.
He said, it's my father's voice. He's calling me from down the tunnel. And I went, okay. No, I'm checking ecology as I'm going. I said, do you want to go down there? He said, I don't think so. I said, can you see him? He said, no, it's too dark. So we use a trick where I get him to put his hands up to his eyes as though he's got binoculars. And right away he can see down the tunnel. He said, there's something there, but it's still too dark. I said, okay, make them night finder goggles, turn the dial. And he suddenly says, he looks stunned. He's got his hands up to his face. His mouth drops open. He says, it's not my father. He said, it's something using his voice. And I went, what kind of thing? He said, it's a man, but he's got a goat's head with a flaming torch burning between the horns. And I said, I don't think you want to go down there. He said, no. So we leave the subway tunnel. He boarded it up, chained it up, and put a do not enter sign. Now, this is not some demonic manifestation. This is something from his unconscious, an archetype that his unconscious is offering for him to deal with, but he hasn't dealt with it yet.
Right.
Now, we have to just close this point. How many NLP practitioners does it take to change a light bulb? 7 plus or minus 2. How many Ericksonian hypnotists does it take to change a light bulb?
That's right.
That's right. And how many mindscapers does it take to change a light bulb? And Justin's brilliant line, none. You get enough light from the goat man's torch.
Which is brilliant. So I hope that this gives those of you listening
a horrible scare.
Yeah, not only a real sense of what's possible.
The creativity that the mind will generate.
The power of your unconscious mind. I'm sure everybody's had this experience where somebody says to you something like, think of a happy childhood memory that you haven't thought of in a long time. And if you think about it, something pops up and you go, wow, that's cool. I hadn't thought of that in a long time.
Right.
Your brain is very, very powerful. And so if you're working on an issue with intent and you're asked to elicit a map and make some changes to it,
it'll happen.
It'll happen. So the process is really cool. And of course, if you're using this out in every day, you don't want to necessarily formally mindscape someone over a beer at the pub when they're talking about their problems. But if you just use language to elicit the problems, talk in metaphors, and help them identify what is their desired place. What is it that they're trying to accomplish? Where are they trying to go? Help them frame a pathway towards that. You will help people solve a lot of their own crap.
Absolutely, Chris. Absolutely. And while we're on that, Suzanne, you're available to do mindscaping online, aren't you? You do mindscaping.
We all are, right?
We all are.
Let's plug Suzanne since we're here.
Thank you
are... You're now online.
Yes,
SuzanneWitt.com, I believe is correct.
And it's Suzanne with no Z, all S's.
We'll put it in the... I'll put the link in the show notes, but SUSANNE is the spelling for your first name, and WITT, SuzanneWitt.com, and you can email her info@SuzanneWitt.com.
I'd love to help you with whatever you need.
Yeah, right. And even if you just want a mindscaping tune-up, you want to experience this, it can really make some phenomenal shifts and changes in your life, and I'm a living example of that.
You are.
Chris is too.
Absolutely. We haven't had time to talk about my own mindscapes and the changes I made in my life as a result of it, but it's really freaking cool.
And where does this come from? This comes from Jungian archetypes. It comes from the way we code time and space in our brains, which was hinted at through conversations I had with my mentor, Derek Balmer, about time circles. There's elements of timeline therapy that came into this. And surprisingly, it even ties into graphology. Because in graphology, where handwriting is in 3 zones, the upper loops are imagination and your moral code and your spiritual aspirations, and the middle area where you get A's and O's and M's and N's is your day-to-day communication and conversations and your day-to-day life and thinking. And then the low descenders that drop below the baseline are all the unconscious stuff, and it corresponds to the id in Freudian psychology, where you have unconscious drives for food, money, sex, etc. Mindscapes are the same. Everything up in the sky is the abstract. It's the spiritual aspiration. And everything on the ground is your pathway through life, your daily communications, your conversations, your thinking processes. And then down below ground, where you find a goat man, stuff like that, that's where you're going to run into the unconscious urges and drives and the id and so on. So there's a lot of stuff there. So contact Suzanne, SuzanneWitt.com, and have some fun mindscaping. Or you can contact me and Chris.
Right. Now, I also want to mention, though, for those of you listening and you're saying, I want to learn more about this mindscaping stuff, you can go to MikeMandelHypnosis.com/mindscaping, and all one word, and you can learn more about it there. But Mike and I and Suzanne are all going to be attending the Hypno Thoughts Live conference this August in Las Vegas, Nevada. And Mike is teaching a 1-day mindscaping class, which is being given away as a free bonus to anyone who is a customer of our mindscaping online training. And of course, on top of that, after you buy the digital training, you get a significant discount on your ticket to HypnoThoughts. So it actually makes it totally
worthwhile. It's kind of a no-brainer.
It's not quite like getting Mindscaping digital training for free, but you're getting a significant discount on the Mindscaping digital training, and you're getting to come for free to the 1-day training with you, Mike, in Vegas.
And Suzanne, she'll be co-training with me.
All for the discount. So to get that, or to just check that out, if it's something that appeals to you, go to MikeMandelHypnosis.com, 1 L in Mandel, MikeMandelHypnosis.com/HT Live 2016. So HTLIVE 2016. and you'll get all the details on the awesome promo. And if you want to hang out with us in Vegas, come and take that class.
Now let's talk about HypnoThoughts Live for a minute. Scott and Richard,
yeah.
they do a phenomenal job on this conference. They've been building it and building it. I think it's the best, the most exciting hypnosis conference in the frickin' world. And you will see a cross-section of people doing hypnosis, all kinds of hypnosis, NLP, etc., from stage performers and street performers to serious therapists and psychologists. This is for anyone who is remotely interested in hypnosis, and it's the best because Scott and Richard open it up to every style.
Yes.
So that they really are not selective. They're not cutting people out. They're opening it to everybody, and you will make some lifelong friends at the conference. We're there for about 3 or 4 days, and Chris and I are going to have an evening Hypnotic Storm Riders drink-off event in the Irish pub one night.
I thought you were going to say Hypnotic Rash event.
We're going to meet at the Irish pub one night with all our Storm Riders, and if you're wearing one of your T-shirts, you can get in, and we're just going to hang together and talk hypnosis and have an absolute blast.
And if you're not wearing a T-shirt, we'll bring you one.
We'll bring you one. Damn it! But yes, but check out HypnoThoughts. Check out HypnoThoughts Live.
Yeah.
Scott and Richard are going to make a phenomenal conference. It was great last year. It's going to be even better this year.
We have said this on many podcasts, and we'll probably say it on many more. It is a fantastic conference. I am sure Scott and Richard could have priced it to make a whole lot of money off of selling tickets, and they have not. They have really picked a venue that is low cost but is nice. They have provided a lot of meals that are good quality, tons of training that is all included in the ticket price. It's something like $329 or whatever, and that's before getting the discount. You can buy the Mindscaping training, like I mentioned, through us, and you'll end up getting a discount on your tickets. So it's just an absolute no-brainer for anyone looking to improve their hypnosis skills. This August in Las Vegas.
Yeah, check it out.
All right, so
Chris, why don't you go right to the empowering question now?
Yeah, before we do our traditional wacky ending, let me ask you this empowering question.
This is the thing where you and I take issue. Being a Brit, I recognize the necessity of not telegraphing the wacky ending.
Oh, but there's one on every podcast.
Wacky ending coming up now.
Yeah.
So you just do it. You never talk about it. So I'm declaring
Mike,
this is the moment where we stop talking about the wacky ending
Sure.
and just do it.
I'm the marketer. It teases people to keep listening.
Okay, well, there you
Okay,
go.
here we go. So I admit it though, so it's okay. Here's your empowering question. When you fail to consider what you didn't not do over the last year, how haven't you avoided resculpting those aspects of your life? And why won't there be consequences to that which you do not do? In other words, it's 1 year from today. Looking back, what miraculous changes have you made in your life? And how did you resculpt things to bring yourself to this place of fulfillment?
Wow.
That's right.
It puts me in a weird spin, man.
Awesome.
Just killed 6 people with an axe and slit the throat of a man your age.
That's so bizarre. Listen, hey, with that, I want to thank you all for listening. This has been podcast episode 68 of Brain Software with Mike Mandel. I'm Chris Thompson, and we've had special guest Suzanne Witt from SuzanneWitt.com, WITT. And we have been talking about mindscaping. If you've enjoyed this and you want to learn more, we would love to get your emails, give us your feedback. If you want to have your questions included on the next podcast, go to Hypnosis.com. Go to SpeakPipe.com. All one word, SpeakPipe, PIPE.com /hypnosis. You can record your voice, ask us your questions, and we will be happy to include that, provided they're appropriate, in the next podcast. Go to iTunes, leave a rating, and we are also now on Stitcher Radio.
Yes.
So with that, thank you.
Thank you, fellow rash riders.
Oh, and Suzanne said it too early.
We'll edit that out. We'll edit that out.
Hold on.
Do it again.
No, we'll just do that again. Ready? All three of us. 1, 2, 3. Thank you, and good night.
You know, I've written a song I find just a lovely thing. This is for all the girls out there called Jennifer, or if you go by Jenny, and I think this is gonna hit you right where it counts. It's a cappella. It goes like this. Jennifer, Jenny, Jenny, your husband lying there in that stupid shirt, and he's got a case full of beer in his gut, and the sheets are dirty, the pillows on the floor, and the kids don't want to go out and play no more. So, Jenny, Jenny, why not go across town to the other side of the tracks to that little specialty shop beside the pool hall and pick up a smooth one for yourself?